Mainstream Christianity literally has no idea how much harm it's done to the LGBTQ plus community. Unfortunately, some LGBTQ plus individuals are no longer with us because of mainstream Christianity. So I've been sharing my story on here for the last few months about how I ended up in a non-denominational / Pentecostal type of Protestant church, and how when I came to the church, I basically discovered that I was a lesbian, and it's because I met this one person that happened to be a lesbian, but she was considering herself an ex-lesbian because the home that she was in was trying to help transform her into not being a lesbian anymore, if that makes sense. She was in something called conversion therapy, and if you don't know what that is, it's basically just the church trying to indoctrinate people that are LGBTQ plus into believing that they can change their orientation. There's actually a documentary on Netflix called Pray Away, and it's all about all of that. It talks about the Exodus ministry, which was one of the main ministries that was trying to help people stop being homosexual. And I remember that I actually went through those programs myself. One of the founders of that program actually apologizes and says that it doesn't work. It was actually a very good documentary, and I literally cried through the whole entire thing because I felt like I was getting healing through watching it, because I was actually being vindicated in the fact that I never needed this type of treatment or program in my life in the first place. Like I said earlier in the video, so many people within that community are no longer with us because they couldn't change, and they were so afraid of disappointing God and their family and their church that they just couldn't be here anymore. So they decided to leave the earth because a church wouldn't accept them for who they were. And now as a nation, we are back to continuing to have to fight for our rights to be ourselves and be who we are, and to not have our identities erased. This type of Protestant evangelical church is what's causing so much harm to our community. So I'm here telling my story because I know that there are so many other people that have gone through something like this. I know that there are so many LGBTQ plus individuals who were raised by pastors and by church leadership that expected them to change who they were as a person and just erase their identity completely. I wasn't raised in a church or with religion or that type of indoctrination. It's something I turned to as a teenager, but I came from a home that was not accepting and not approving of me being a lesbian. So I know what it's like to not feel like your own family accepts you, and knowing that you feel like you might have to stay in a closet and pretend to be something that you're not, just so that you can please all of these people in your life. So where I left off in the last episode, I was saying that I was coming back to this church, and as I came back, people knew that I had been living as a lesbian and that I was now going to need some kind of help from them to change that area in my life. I had decided that I was going to return to this church. I don't know why. It was a really bad decision, but nonetheless, I chose to return. And when I did, I went to my leader, Sandra, and I told her, look, I'm back. I'm planning to serve God wholeheartedly. And, I just want to, just be back in discipleship and start over, basically. And what Sandra said to me was that she didn't really know how to deal with my situation because she's never had like an experience with dealing with someone that was LGBTQ plus. So she was gonna refer me to someone else who supposedly had experience. This is so cringe. It's so hard to tell this story and to tell you that I was actually a part of this is just disgusting to me right now. So essentially she was telling me that she wasn't a lesbian and she didn't know anything about dealing with homosexual people, so she wasn't gonna deal with me anymore, and that she was going to turn me over to someone who she thought might be able to help. So she introduced me to this lady named Patty, who was a pastor's wife in a church in Los Angeles, and it was of course under our same umbrella of the name of our main church, and it was just a baby satellite church of our church. And this woman apparently had years of experience of dealing with people that, you know, come from what they were calling the lifestyle at our church. They literally called the LGBTQ plus community a lifestyle, as though it were something we chose and it was something we could choose not to do anymore. This is crazy. I can't believe I even believe this. It's so triggering to just remember the words that they were using to define us as, you know, those who were in the lifestyle. Anyways, Patty had these weekly groups that she had, and this is where it gets really disturbing, because what these groups do is to get to the root of your supposed problem of homosexuality. What they believe is the case is that you were you had trauma in your life, and that it was maybe because you were abused in some way by your father or your mother, and that because that happened to you, or because you were SA'd at an early age as a teenager, that was also maybe part of the reason why you are now an LGBTQ plus individual. This is what the church is teaching. They had unlicensed people pretending to be counselors within the church, and she was one of those pretend counselors. Her counseling credentials were going to a community college and getting some drug and alcohol counseling units, and that's what she used as her basis for recovery of homosexuality. And then she introduced me to the mainstream individuals that actually were specifically trying to target and help our community, which was Exodus Ministries. And there are still some ministries like that today. Exodus no longer exists, thank God. However, all of their teachings have trickled down into other ministries and other churches around the world that continue to do this unethical practice of, what is it called again? Conversion therapy. So I started going regularly to all of these meetings and groups that they were having to help me change my orientation. They even had conferences. The church is pretty sick, if you ask me. And they're treating us like we're the sick ones and we're the ones that need help.